The black dress hung on Olivia Easton like a second skin, the fabric worn thin at the elbows and hem from 365 days of constant wear. And when she walked through the dusty streets of Hawthorne, Nevada in the summer of 1882, people whispered that grief had carved her beautiful face into something harder, something untouchable. She had been 23 when her husband died in the mine collapse, 24 now, and the black fabric that rustled against her ankles had become as much a part of her identity as her auburn hair or green eyes. The silver mine that had taken Thomas had also taken 17 other men, leaving Hawthorne a town of widows and hollow-eyed children. But Olivia had worn her mourning longer than most, deeper than most, as if by keeping the darkness wrapped around her body, she could somehow keep his memory from fading into the desert wind. The sun beat down mercilessly on the main street as she made her way toward the general store, her black parasol doing little to shield her from the oppressive heat that shimmered off the packed earth. Hawthorne sat in the middle of nowhere, a mining town that had sprung up almost overnight when silver was discovered in the hills, and now it clung to existence with stubborn determination, despite the dangers that lurked in the shafts below and the harsh landscape that surrounded it. Olivia had grown up in San Francisco, had married Thomas there before following him to this desolate place chasing dreams of wealth, and sometimes she wondered if she would have made different choices had she known that their time together would be measured in months rather than years. The general store was blessedly cool inside, and she moved through the familiar aisles collecting flour, sugar, coffee, the basic necessities that kept her alive in the small house she still maintained on the edge of town. She had sold most of Thomas's possessions months ago, keeping only his pocket watch and wedding ring, and she supported herself now by taking in sewing and mending for the miners and the few respectable families that called Hawthorne home. It was lonely work, tedious work, but it kept her hands busy and her mind occupied, and that was all she asked for anymore. Miss Olivia, the shopkeeper's wife said gently, using the title Olivia had adopted after Thomas's death, as if by removing the Mrs., she could somehow separate herself from the pain of widowhood. There's a dance at the social hall tomorrow night, music and everything. You should think about coming. Olivia shook her head without looking up from the sack of flour she was examining. Thank you, but no. It has been a year, the woman pressed, her voice kind but insistent. Thomas would not want you living like this, all alone, never smiling, never. You do not know what Thomas would want, Olivia said, and the sharpness in her voice cut through the cool air like a knife. She immediately regretted her tone, softening it as she added, I appreciate your concern, truly, but I am not ready for dances. She paid for her goods and stepped back into the blazing sunlight, blinking against the sudden brightness. The street was more crowded now, mid-afternoon bringing people out despite the heat, and she wove through the clusters of miners and merchants and cattle drivers who had stopped in town on their way to California. Hawthorne was like that, a waypoint for people heading somewhere else, and Olivia sometimes felt like the only person who had put down roots in this transient place, even if those roots grew in barren soil. She was nearly home when she saw the cowboy for the first time. He was leaning against the hitching post outside the saloon, tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that needed cutting. He wore the typical gear of a cattleman, worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, dusty boots with spurs that caught the light, and a hat that had seen better days. But it was his eyes that caught her attention as she passed, blue as a mountain lake, and the way they tracked her movement with an intensity that made her clutch her parcels tighter against her chest. Afternoon, miss, he said, tipping his hat, his voice carrying a slight drawl that marked him as someone from farther south, maybe Texas or New Mexico. Olivia nodded curtly and kept walking, her black skirt stirring up small clouds of dust with each step. She had grown accustomed to the attention her mourning dress attracted, the way men either avoided her entirely or stared with a mixture of pity and curiosity. This cowboy seemed to fall into the latter category, and she had no interest in explaining her circumstances to a stranger who would likely be gone within a day or two. Her house stood at the end of a row of similar structures, small wooden buildings with tin roofs that turned them into ovens during the summer months. She let herself inside and set her parcels on the kitchen table, then moved to open all the windows in hopes of catching a cross breeze. The interior was sparse but clean, everything in its place, the only decoration a tin-type photograph of her and Thomas on their wedding day. She touched the frame lightly, as she did every time she entered the house, a ritual that had become as automatic as breathing. The rest of the afternoon passed in the usual routine. She prepared a simple dinner of beans and cornbread, ate alone at the table, washed her single plate and cup. As the sun began to set, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, she settled into her chair by the window with a basket of mending. Her hands moved mechanically, needle flashing in the lamplight, repairing tears and replacing buttons, while her mind drifted to memories of Thomas, of the life they had planned together, of all the tomorrows that had been stolen by falling rock and unstable timbers. The next day brought more of the same, a Sunday that meant rest for some, but not for her. She spent the morning doing laundry, scrubbing her black dresses in the wash tub behind the house, hanging them to dry in the already brutal sun. By afternoon she was exhausted, her back aching and her hands raw, but she forced herself to complete the mending she had promised to Mrs. Chen, the Chinese laundry owner's wife, who had been kind to her after Thomas's death. She was delivering the mended clothes to the laundry when she heard the music starting up at the social hall. The sound of a fiddle and guitar drifted through the evening air, cheerful and inviting, and despite herself, Olivia felt a pang of longing for the life she used to have, when she had loved to dance and laugh and lose herself in the simple pleasure of movement and melody. Thomas had been a terrible dancer, all left feet and apologies, but he had tried for her sake, and she had loved him all the more for his earnest attempts. "You should go," Mrs. Chen said when Olivia handed over the basket of neatly folded shirts. "Young woman like you should not be alone all the time." "I am fine," Olivia insisted, but the words felt hollow, even to her own ears. She walked home slowly, deliberately taking a route that would not lead her past the social hall, but the music followed her anyway, seeping into her bones and stirring something she had thought long dead. Back in her quiet house, she tried to focus on her work, but her needle kept slipping, and her stitches grew uneven. Finally, as full darkness fell and the stars emerged in the vast Nevada sky, she set aside her sewing and simply sat in the chair, listening to the distant sounds of laughter and music, feeling more alone than she had in months. The knock on her door came just after 9 o'clock, startling her so badly she pricked her finger with the needle. She sucked on the small wound as she went to answer, wondering who would be calling at this hour. When she opened the door, she found the cowboy from yesterday standing on her narrow porch, hat in hand, his expression serious but not unfriendly. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cool and formal. "Name is Nathan Young," he said, and his directness surprised her. "I am working on the Anderson Ranch, about 15 miles north of here. Been in town a few days getting supplies." "That does not explain why you were at my door, Mr. Young." He had the grace to look slightly abashed. "No, I suppose it does not. Truth is, I saw you yesterday, and then again today, and I noticed you were wearing morning dress. I asked around, found out about your husband and how you have been keeping to yourself this past year. Thought maybe you could use some company." Olivia felt anger flare hot in her chest. "You thought wrong. I do not need charity, Mr. Young, especially not from a stranger who thinks he knows what is best for me, based on gossip and speculation." "That is not what he started, but she cut him off. "Good evening, Mr. Young. Please do not call on me again." She closed the door firmly, leaning against it as she heard his footsteps retreat from the porch. Her heart was racing, though whether from anger or something else she could not quite identify. The audacity of the man coming to her home uninvited, presuming to know what she needed based on nothing more than observation and town gossip. She returned to her chair and picked up her sewing with shaking hands, determined to put the encounter out of her mind. But sleep eluded her that night, and when she finally drifted off in the early hours of the morning, her dreams were filled with music and a pair of blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed armor. The following week passed without incident. Olivia fell back into her routine, finding comfort in the predictability of her days. She saw Nathan Young once more, from a distance, as he loaded supplies onto a wagon outside the general store, but he did not approach her, and she did not acknowledge him. It was better this way, she told herself. She had no room in her life for complications, for men who thought they could waltz in and fix her brokenness with a smile and an invitation. But Hawthorne was a small town, and avoiding someone completely was nearly impossible. The next Sunday, Olivia arrived at the church where she occasionally attended services to find Nathan sitting in one of the back pews. He nodded to her as she entered, a simple acknowledgement that did not demand response, and she chose a seat several rows ahead, determined to ignore his presence. The minister's sermon was about forgiveness and moving forward, about how God did not intend for his children to carry burdens longer than necessary, and Olivia squirmed in her seat as the words seemed aimed directly at her heart. She knew intellectually that the minister could not have known about her encounter with Nathan, that the sermon was simply an unfortunate coincidence, but it felt personal nonetheless. After the service, as she was leaving, Nathan fell into step beside her. "Miss Easton, I want to apologize for the other night. I overstepped, and I am sorry for any distress I caused you." His sincerity caught her off guard. She had expected him to defend his actions or make excuses, not offer a straightforward apology. "Thank you," she said stiffly, unsure how else to respond. "I lost someone too," he continued, his voice low enough that the other churchgoers streaming past could not hear. "My wife, Sarah, 3 years ago. Fever took her in the winter, and she was gone before the doctor could even make it to our ranch. So, I do understand, at least a little, what you were going through." Olivia stopped walking and turned to face him fully for the first time. In the bright morning light, she could see the lines of pain etched around his eyes, the way his jaw tightened when he spoke his dead wife's name. "I am sorry for your loss," she said, and meant it. "It gets easier," Nathan said. "Not better exactly, but easier. You learn to carry it differently, so it does not weigh quite so heavy on your shoulders. But you have to let yourself live again, Miss Easton. You have to give yourself permission to be happy, even if it feels like a betrayal at first." "I am not ready," Olivia whispered, the admission costing her more than she wanted to acknowledge. "I know, but when you are, I hope you will consider giving yourself that chance." He settled his hat back on his head and tipped it to her. "Good day, Miss Easton." She watched him walk away, his long strides eating up the dusty ground, and felt something shift inside her chest. It was not much, just the smallest crack in the wall she had built around her heart, but it was enough to let in a sliver of light. Over the next few weeks, Nathan Young became a regular fixture in Hawthorne. Olivia learned through the inevitable town gossip that he had taken a permanent position as foreman on the Anderson Ranch, which meant he would not be moving on as she had initially assumed. He came into town every few days for supplies or to conduct business, and he always made a point of greeting her if their paths crossed, never pushing for more than a simple hello, never making her feel pressured or uncomfortable. She found herself watching for him, though she would never admit it aloud. There was something steady about him, something solid and dependable that reminded her of Thomas in the best ways while being completely his own person. He had a quiet strength that showed in the way he handled the skittish horses outside the saloon, in the patient way he dealt with the sometimes difficult shopkeepers, in the kindness he showed to the Chinese workers who were often treated as less than human by many of the white miners. August melted into September, the brutal heat finally beginning to ease as autumn approached. The town was preparing for the Harvest Festival, a celebration that marked the end of summer and the beginning of the cooler months. Olivia had attended the previous year, still numb with fresh grief, moving through the festivities like a ghost while everyone tiptoed around her. This year, she was determined to stay home, to avoid the well-meaning questions and pitying looks that were sure to follow her. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. 3 days before the festival, Mrs. Henderson, the wife of the mine owner, appeared at Olivia's door with an urgent request. Her daughter's wedding dress needed extensive alterations, and with the wedding scheduled for the week after the festival, she was desperate for someone with Olivia's skill to help. "I will pay you double your usual rate, Mrs." Henderson said, her plump face flushed with anxiety. "Please, Miss Easton. You are the finest seamstress in Hawthorne, and Caroline's heart is set on this particular style." Olivia agreed, partly because she needed the money, and partly because she had always liked Caroline Henderson, a sweet girl who had never treated her with anything but genuine kindness. But when Mrs. Henderson insisted that Olivia come to their house for the final fitting during the festival, when all the measurements and adjustments could be done without rushing, Olivia found herself trapped by her own agreement. The day of the Harvest Festival dawned clear and bright, with a crispness in the air that promised cooler days ahead. Olivia dressed in her black morning dress as always, though she noticed with some surprise that the fabric was beginning to show serious wear. She would need to make a new one soon, or perhaps a small voice in the back of her mind suggested. Perhaps she could consider transitioning to gray or lavender, the half-mourning colors that indicated a widow was ready to slowly rejoin society. She pushed the thought away as she walked to the Henderson house, a large structure on the hill that overlooked the town. The sounds of the festival were already rising from the main street, music and laughter, children squealing with delight, the calls of vendors selling their wares. Olivia kept her eyes straight ahead, refusing to let herself be drawn in by the merriment. The fitting took longer than expected. Caroline was a perfectionist, wanting every seam and tuck to be absolutely perfect, and Olivia found herself spending hours on her knees pinning and repinning the elaborate dress. By the time she finished, the sun was beginning to set, and her back ached from the prolonged awkward position. "Stay for dinner," Mrs. Henderson insisted when Olivia tried to make her excuses. "It is the least we can do after keeping you here all day. Besides, the festival will be in full swing now, with the dancing starting soon. You should enjoy yourself a little before heading home." Olivia wanted to refuse, but her stomach was growling, and the smell of roasted meat wafting from the Hendersons' dining room was too tempting to resist. She agreed to a quick meal, telling herself she would slip away before the dancing began in earnest. But dinner turned into dessert, which turned into Mrs. Henderson practically dragging her down the hill to the main street where lanterns had been strung between the buildings, casting a warm golden glow over the festivities. A platform had been erected in the center of the street, and on it a small band was playing lively tunes while couples spun and swayed in the growing darkness. Olivia stood on the edge of the crowd, feeling like an intruder in this world of light and joy. She was just about to slip away when she felt a presence beside her and turned to find Nathan Young watching the dancers with a wistful expression on his weathered face. "Miss Easton," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I did not expect to see you here." "I did not expect to be here," she admitted. "I was doing a fitting and got waylaid." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the dancers whirl past. The music was infectious, a fast-paced reel that had people clapping and stomping their feet in time with the beat. Olivia felt her own foot tapping despite herself, muscle memory from years of dancing with Thomas at events just like this one. "Do you dance, Mr. Young?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. "I do," he said. "Not as well as I would like, but well enough to avoid stepping on too many toes." He paused, then added, "Do you?" "I used to love it," Olivia said softly. "Before." The music changed to a slower tune, a waltz that was elegant and haunting. Nathan turned to face her fully, and in the lantern light, his blue eyes were impossibly gentle. "Miss Easton, you have been wearing black for a year straight now. You have mourned as is proper and right. But Thomas would not want you to stop living. He would want you to dance and laugh and find joy again, even if it feels impossible right now." "You do not know what Thomas would want," Olivia said, but there was no heat in her words this time, only a deep weariness. "You are right. I did not know him, but I know what I would want if I were in his place. I would want my wife to be happy. I would want her to dance." He held out his hand, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. "You have mourned enough. Come dance with me." Olivia stared at his outstretched hand, as if it were a snake that might bite her. Everything in her screamed to refuse, to run back to her quiet house and her safe solitude. But beneath the fear, beneath the guilt, she felt something else stirring, a desperate hunger for connection, for touch, for the simple pleasure of moving to music with another human being. "I am wearing black," she said, grasping at excuses. "It would not be appropriate." "This is Nevada, not Boston," Nathan said with a slight smile. "And I promise you, no one here is going to judge a widow for taking a single dance at a town festival. But if you are not ready, I understand. I will not push." He started to lower his hand, and something in Olivia broke. Before she could second-guess herself, she reached out and placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth and strength of his calloused palm against her own. "One dance," she said, her voice trembling. "Just one." Nathan's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He led her onto the makeshift dance floor, positioning them at the edge where they would be less conspicuous. When he placed his hand on her waist, she stiffened, but he held her gently, respectfully, maintaining a proper distance as he began to lead her through the steps of the waltz. At first, Olivia was stiff and awkward, her body having forgotten how to move like this. But Nathan was patient, his lead firm and clear, and gradually she began to relax. The music swelled around them, and she found herself remembering why she had loved dancing so much, the way it made her feel weightless and free, untethered from earthly concerns. "You are a good dancer," Nathan said as they turned in a slow circle. "So are you. You undersold your abilities. I had a good teacher. Sarah loved to dance, used to make me practice with her in the barn when the work was done for the day." There was fondness in his voice rather than pain, and Olivia marveled at how he could speak of his dead wife with such warmth, without the crushing weight of grief she still felt whenever she thought of Thomas. "How do you do it?" she asked impulsively. "How do you speak of her without falling apart?" Nathan considered the question as he guided her through a turn. "Time helps, but mostly I decided that honoring her memory meant living the kind of life she would want me to live. Sarah was all light and laughter. She would have been furious if I had spent years moping around, refusing to engage with the world. So I live for both of us now, taking joy where I can find it, trying to be the kind of man she believed I could be." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes, but they were not entirely sad tears. "Thomas was like that too. He always said I worried too much, that I needed to learn to take life less seriously. He would probably think it was ridiculous that I have been wearing black for a full year, refusing to go anywhere or do anything fun. Then maybe it is time to start honoring him by living again," Nathan suggested gently. "Not forgetting him, you will never forget him, but making room for new experiences, new joys. Maybe even, eventually, new love." The song ended and they came to a stop, still holding each other in the dance position. Around them, other couples were breaking apart, applauding the musicians, but Olivia and Nathan remained frozen in place, caught in the moment. "I do not know if I can," Olivia whispered. "You do not have to know right now, but you took a first step tonight, and that is something." Nathan released her slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might shatter whatever fragile connection they had formed. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Easton. It was an honor." He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the crowd, and Olivia was left standing alone at the edge of the dance floor, her heart pounding and her mind racing. She felt as if she had just woken from a long sleep, her senses suddenly sharp and alive in a way they had not been for months. The music sounded brighter, the lantern light more beautiful, the night air sweeter against her skin. She did not stay for another dance. Instead, she made her way home, but the walk felt different tonight, less like a retreat and more like a purposeful journey. Inside her house, she lit the lamps and stood in front of the mirror, really looking at herself for the first time in months. The woman staring back at her was pale and too thin, with shadows under her eyes and a tightness around her mouth that spoke of sustained sorrow. But there was also a spark there now, something that had been missing, and as Olivia touched her reflection, she made a decision. She would not rush into anything. She would not disrespect Thomas's memory by immediately throwing off her mourning, but she would start to live again, slowly and carefully, one small step at a time. And if those steps happened to lead her toward a blue-eyed cowboy with a kind smile and understanding heart, well, perhaps that was not the worst thing that could happen. The next morning, Olivia walked into the general store with a specific purpose. "I need fabric," she told the shopkeeper. "Gray or lavender, something suitable for half mourning. And I need it to be good quality." The shopkeeper's wife beamed at her. "I have just the thing. Came in last week from San Francisco. Let me show you." Olivia selected a soft gray wool that would be perfect for autumn and winter, along with some lighter lavender cotton for warmer days. It felt strange to be choosing colors after a solid year of black, but it also felt right, like she was finally ready to emerge from the cocoon of grief that had enveloped her. Over the next week, she worked on her new dress in the evenings after her mending work was complete. Her hands moved deftly over the fabric, creating something beautiful and practical, and with each stitch she felt a little more like herself again. She took breaks to make herself proper meals instead of just eating whatever was easiest. She opened her windows wide and let fresh air and sunlight flood the house. She even visited the graves in the small cemetery on the edge of town, standing before Thomas's simple marker with a bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers. "I am trying," she told the headstone, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "I am trying to live the way you would want me to. I hope you understand. I hope you know I will always love you, but I cannot stay frozen in that moment forever. I have to move forward, even if it scares me." The wind picked up, rustling through the sagebrush, and Olivia chose to believe it was Thomas's way of telling her he understood, that he approved. She saw Nathan several times over the following weeks, always from a distance at first. He seemed to be giving her space, not pushing for more than she was ready to give, and she appreciated his patience more than she could express. But gradually, their encounters became more frequent and more intentional. They would meet at the general store and end up talking for an hour about everything and nothing. They crossed paths at church and walked back to town together, discussing the sermon and sharing stories from their pasts. Olivia learned that Nathan was originally from Texas, that he had inherited a small ranch from his father, but sold it after Sarah died because the memories were too painful. He had spent the last 3 years drifting from place to place, working as a cowboy on various ranches, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. But Hawthorne felt different to him, he said. The Anderson ranch needed a good foreman, and the work was satisfying in a way he had not experienced in years. In turn, Olivia told him about her life in San Francisco, about how she had met Thomas at a church social, and known within a week that she would marry him. She spoke of their dreams for the future, the children they had planned to have, the house they wanted to build once the mine started paying better. And for the first time, she could talk about these lost dreams without feeling like they were crushing her under their weight. October brought cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn color to the sparse vegetation around Hawthorne. Olivia finished her gray dress and wore it to church, feeling self-conscious but also liberated as she walked down the aisle. The congregation noticed, of course, everything was noticed in a town this size, but the comments were kind, supportive, acknowledging that she had fulfilled her mourning obligations and was ready to rejoin the living. Nathan was waiting outside after the service, and his face lit up when he saw her in the gray dress. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "Thank you. It feels strange, wearing color again." Strange good or strange bad? Olivia considered the question. Strange good, I think, like I'm becoming someone new while still holding on to who I was. "That is exactly right," Nathan said. He hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to take a walk with me? There is a place I have been wanting to show you, if you are amenable." Curiosity won out over caution. "All right, where are we going?" "You will see." He led her out of town, following a narrow trail that wound through the scrub brush and rocky outcroppings that characterized the Nevada landscape. They walked in comfortable silence, the only sounds the crunch of their footsteps and the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. After about 30 minutes, Nathan stopped at the edge of a small canyon Olivia had never seen before. "I found this a few weeks ago," he said. "Thought it was the most peaceful spot I have come across since arriving in Nevada." He was right. The canyon was narrow and deep, its walls striped with layers of red and gold rock that glowed in the morning sun. At the bottom, a thin stream trickled through, creating a ribbon of green vegetation that was startling against the otherwise arid landscape. The wind moved through the canyon with a sound like music, and Olivia felt something in her chest ease at the unexpected beauty of the place. "It is magnificent," she breathed. "I come here sometimes when I need to think, or when the noise of the ranch gets to be too much." Nathan settled onto a large flat rock and patted the space beside him. "Figured you might appreciate it too." Olivia sat, careful to maintain a respectable distance, and for a while they just looked at the canyon in silence. Finally, Nathan spoke. "I have enjoyed getting to know you these past weeks, Olivia. May I call you Olivia?" "Yes," she said, realizing it was the first time she had given anyone permission to use her first name since Thomas died. "And I may call you Nathan?" "I would like that." He picked up a small stone and turned it over in his hands. "I want to be clear about my intentions. I am not trying to replace your husband or make you forget him, but I find myself drawn to you in ways I have not felt since Sarah died. You are strong and kind and resilient, and I admire the way you are choosing to move forward despite your pain. I would like to court you properly if you are open to that. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who understand loss, trying to find something good together." Olivia's heart raced. She had known this moment was coming, had felt the pull between them growing stronger with each passing day, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. "I am afraid," she admitted, "afraid of dishonoring Thomas's memory, afraid of getting hurt again, afraid that I do not remember how to be happy." "Fear is natural," Nathan said. "I am afraid too, but I have learned that fear is not a good enough reason to avoid living. We could both stay locked in our grief forever, safe but alone. Or we could take a chance on each other, knowing full well that life does not come with guarantees, but that the risk might be worth it. Olivia looked out at the canyon, at the way the sun illuminated the striped walls and made the thin streams sparkle like diamonds. She thought about the year she had spent in darkness, about the black dress that had been both armor and prison. She thought about the dance at the festival, about how good it had felt to move in Nathan's arms, to feel like a woman rather than just a widow. And she thought about Thomas, about how he had always encouraged her to embrace life fully, to take chances, to not let fear hold her back. "All right," she said, turning to face Nathan with a tentative smile. "You may court me, but slowly, Nathan. I need to take this slowly." His answering smile was radiant. "Slowly is perfect. We have all the time in the world." And so began the courtship of Olivia Easton and Nathan Young, a careful dance of two wounded souls learning to trust again. Nathan was true to his word, never pushing her faster than she was ready to go. He called on her twice a week, always at respectable times, and always for appropriate lengths. They took walks around Hawthorne, talked about their days, shared meals at the restaurant when Nathan was in town. He brought her small gifts, wildflowers picked on his way into town, a book he thought she might enjoy, a spool of thread in a color she had mentioned needing. Olivia found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that surprised her. She took extra care with her appearance on the days she knew he would be coming, pinning her hair more carefully, and even adding a small cameo brooch that had belonged to her mother. She laughed more, smiled more, felt the heavy weight of grief gradually lifting from her shoulders. The town, naturally, noticed the developing relationship and had opinions about it. Most people were supportive, happy to see Olivia emerging from her year of mourning with a good man at her side. But there were a few who clucked their tongues and suggested she was moving too fast, that a proper widow should wait longer before accepting another man's attentions. Olivia tried to ignore the gossips, but their words still stung, making her question whether she was doing the right thing. It was Mrs. Chen who finally set her straight. "You owe nothing to gossips," the older woman said firmly as she helped Olivia hang laundry one afternoon. "You owe everything to yourself and to memory of your husband. Does he feel dishonored by your happiness? Does he turn in grave when you smile?" "No," Olivia admitted. "If anything, I think he would be pleased that I am learning to live again. Then that is all that matters. You are young, you are beautiful, you have whole life ahead of you. Do not waste it trying to please people who have nothing better to do than judge others." Armed with Mrs. Chen's wisdom, Olivia pushed the gossips from her mind and focused on what really mattered: the growing connection between herself and Nathan, the way he made her feel seen and valued, the possibility of a future that held joy as well as sorrow. November arrived with colder temperatures and occasional rain that turned the dusty streets of Hawthorne into rivers of mud. Nathan invited Olivia to the Anderson Ranch for Sunday dinner, and after some hesitation, she accepted. She borrowed Mrs. Henderson's buggy for the journey, driving herself out along the rutted road that led north from town. The Anderson Ranch was impressive, a sprawling operation with hundreds of head of cattle, multiple barns and outbuildings, and a large main house where the owners lived. Nathan met her at the entrance, looking slightly nervous as he helped her down from the buggy. "I have told them all about you," he said. "They are eager to meet you, but I warned them not to be overwhelming." The Anderson family turned out to be warm and welcoming. Mr. Anderson was a gruff but kind man in his 60s, his wife a plump woman with a ready smile and seemingly infinite energy. Their 3 children were all grown and working in various capacities on the ranch, and they treated Nathan with obvious respect and affection. Dinner was a loud, chaotic affair with multiple conversations happening simultaneously and food being passed in all directions. Olivia had not been part of a large family gathering since before Thomas died, and she found herself laughing at the friendly arguments and good-natured teasing that characterized the meal. Nathan sat beside her, occasionally touching her hand under the table in a gesture of support and affection that made her heart flutter. After dinner, Nathan showed her around the ranch. He introduced her to his favorite horses, pointing out the personality quirks of each animal with obvious pride. He took her to see the new calves in the barn, their long legs still wobbly as they nursed from their mothers. And finally, he led her to his own quarters, a small but comfortable cabin at the edge of the property that the Andersons had provided for their foreman. "It is not much," Nathan said as they stood outside the cabin, "but it is mine, and it is the first place I have felt like I could call home since Sarah died." "It is perfect," Olivia said, meaning it. The cabin was neat and well-maintained, with smoke curling from the chimney and curtains in the windows that suggested someone who cared about making a space livable rather than just functional. Nathan walked her back to the buggy as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of the pink and orange. "Thank you for coming today," he said. "It meant a lot to me, having you here, seeing where I work and live. Thank you for inviting me. Your employers are wonderful people." Nathan helped her into the buggy, then stood holding the reins for a moment longer than necessary. "Olivia, I know we have only been courting for a short time, but I need you to know that this is not casual for me. I am falling in love with you. I did not think I would ever feel this way again, but you have brought light back into my life in ways I cannot fully express." Olivia's breath caught. She had known, of course, that their relationship was heading in this direction, but hearing him say the words out loud made her realize how deeply she felt in return. "Nathan, You do not have to say anything back," he interrupted gently. "I just needed you to know where my heart stands. Take all the time you need to figure out your own feelings. I am not going anywhere." But Olivia shook her head. "That is not what I was going to say. I was going to say that I am falling in love with you too. It terrifies me, and sometimes I feel guilty about it, but I cannot deny what I feel. You have given me a reason to look forward to tomorrow again, and that is a gift beyond measure." Nathan's smile was brilliant in the fading light. He reached up and took her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with old-fashioned gallantry. "Then, I am the luckiest man in Nevada." Olivia drove back to Hawthorne in a daze, her heart singing despite the cold wind that whipped through the buggy. She was falling in love. After a year of darkness and despair, after convincing herself she would never feel anything but grief again, she was falling in love with a good man who understood her pain and did not try to rush her healing. December brought the first snow to the mountains surrounding Hawthorne, though the town itself remained mostly dry and cold. Olivia began working on a new dress, this one in a deep purple that Nathan had admired in the general store window. It was not quite full color, she was not ready for that yet, but it was closer, a symbol of her continued movement toward a new life. Christmas approached, and with it came the annual town celebration. Olivia had avoided last year's festivities entirely, unable to face the merriment so soon after Thomas's death. But this year, with Nathan at her side, she found herself actually looking forward to the event. The celebration was held in the church, with decorations made by the local children, and a choir that sang carols with more enthusiasm than skill. Olivia sat with Nathan in a middle pew, their shoulders touching in the crowded space, and felt a contentment she had not experienced in years. After the service, there was a potluck dinner in the church hall, and Olivia contributed a pie she had spent all morning perfecting. Nathan pulled her aside during the dinner, leading her to a quiet corner away from the crowd. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. "It is not much, but I saw it and thought of you." He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Olivia opened it carefully to find a delicate silver locket, the kind meant to hold tiny photographs or locks of hair. It was beautiful and clearly expensive, far more than she had expected. "Nathan, I cannot accept this. It is too much." "Please," he said, "I want you to have it. You could put a picture of Thomas in one side, if you want. Keep his memory close while still moving forward. That is what I do with Sarah. I honor who she was and what we had, while still making room for new love." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she clutched the locket. It was perfect, a way to hold on to the past while embracing the future. "Thank you," she whispered. "I will treasure it always." Nathan helped her fasten the locket around her neck, his fingers warm against her skin. When he stepped back, his eyes were serious. "Olivia, I know it has only been a few months, but I am certain of my feelings. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to give you the children and home you dreamed of with Thomas. I want to grow old with you." He took a deep breath. "I am asking you to marry me. Not right away, we can have a long engagement if you need more time. But I want you to know my intentions, to understand that this is not some passing fancy. I am committed to you, to us, for as long as you will have me." Olivia's mind raced. Marriage. She had not let herself think that far ahead, had been so focused on just getting through each day that the idea of making plans for a future seemed almost impossible. But as she looked at Nathan, at the hope and love and patience in his blue eyes, she realized that she wanted this too. She wanted to wake up in his arms and cook him breakfast and argue with him about silly things. She wanted to have his children and build a home with him and create new memories that would not erase her time with Thomas, but would exist alongside it, equally precious in their own way. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Nathan, I will marry you." His shout of joy turned every head in the church hall, but Olivia did not care. She was laughing and crying all at once as Nathan lifted her off her feet and spun her around, their happiness too big to be contained. People crowded around to congratulate them, and Olivia accepted their well wishes with grace, feeling truly part of the community for the first time since Thomas's death. They decided on a spring wedding, giving Olivia time to complete her transition out of mourning and to prepare properly for married life. The engagement period was sweet and full of anticipation. Nathan taught Olivia to ride a horse properly, since she would need that skill once she moved to the ranch. They spent hours talking about their plans for the future, about how many children they wanted and what they would name them, about improvements Nathan wanted to make to his cabin before Olivia moved in. January of 1883 arrived cold and crisp, the new year full of promise. Olivia had put away her black dresses entirely now, replacing them with grays and lavenders and even a few pieces in soft blues and greens. She looked like a different woman than the one who had walked through town a year ago, weighted down by grief and darkness. She was still herself, still carried the memory of Thomas in her heart, but she had made room for joy again, for love, for hope. Nathan proposed properly on a Sunday afternoon in February, kneeling in the muddy street outside her house with a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. "I know I already asked once," he said with a self-deprecating smile, "but I wanted to do it right, with a ring and everything." Olivia pulled him to his feet and kissed him, not caring who might see. "You foolish man. Yes, I will marry you. I already said yes." "I know, but a woman deserves a proper proposal. You deserve all the traditional courtship rituals, even if we are doing them slightly out of order." The wedding was set for April 15th, a date that would mark almost exactly a year and a half since Thomas's death. Olivia worried briefly about the timing, about whether people would think she had not mourned long enough, but Mrs. Chen's words came back to her. She owed nothing to the gossips. She owed everything to herself and to the men she had loved. Preparations for the wedding consumed the next 2 months. Olivia sewed her own dress, a beautiful creation in pale ivory silk that had cost more than she usually spent on fabric in a year. Nathan insisted on contributing to the cost, saying it was an investment in their future together. She made new curtains for the cabin and a quilt for their bed, putting all her skills as a seamstress into creating a home that would be truly theirs. The Andersons offered to host the wedding reception at the ranch, a generous gesture that spoke to how much they valued Nathan and how welcoming they were toward Olivia. She accepted gratefully, knowing the ranch could accommodate more guests than anywhere in town. March brought warmer weather and the first signs of spring. Wildflowers began to bloom in the desert, splashes of color against the brown landscape. Nathan took Olivia back to the canyon he had shown her months ago, and they sat on the same flat rock where he had first asked to court her. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sun set over the canyon walls. "I am," Olivia said, and realized with some surprise that it was completely true. She was happy, genuinely and deeply happy, in a way she had not thought possible a year ago. "I still miss Thomas, and I probably always will. But I am happy, Nathan. You have given me a life worth living again." "You did that yourself," Nathan corrected gently. "I just had the privilege of being here to witness it. You are the strongest woman I have ever known, Olivia. What you have survived, how you have chosen to move forward, it is remarkable." They sat in the canyon until the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in each other's presence in the way only two people deeply in love can be. When they finally made their way back to town, Olivia felt a peace she had not known since before Thomas died, a sense that her life was moving in the right direction, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The final weeks before the wedding flew by in a blur of last-minute preparations. Olivia moved her belongings to the ranch bit by bit, transforming Nathan's cabin into a home for two. She kept the tintype of her and Thomas, placing it on the mantel where she could see it every day, and Nathan never once suggested she should put it away. He understood that loving him did not mean forgetting Thomas, and that acceptance meant everything to Olivia. April 14th arrived, the day before the wedding, and Olivia made one final trip to the cemetery. She knelt beside Thomas's grave, placing fresh flowers on the simple marker, and spoke to him as she had done so many times over the past year and a half. "I am getting married tomorrow," she said softly. "His name is Nathan, and he is a good man. He reminds me of you, in some ways kind and patient and strong. I think you would have liked him. I hope you would have approved." She paused, touching the cool stone. "I will always love you, Thomas. What we had was real and precious, and I will carry it with me for the rest of my life. But I am ready to love again, to build a new life with Nathan, while still honoring what you and I shared. I hope wherever you are, you understand. I hope you are at peace." The wind whispered through the cemetery, and Olivia felt that same sense of release she had experienced months ago, the feeling that Thomas was giving her his blessing. She stood, brushing off her skirt, and walked back toward town with her head held high, ready to embrace her future. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with a warmth in the air that promised summer was on its way. Olivia dressed in her ivory silk gown, her hair arranged in an elaborate style by Mrs. Henderson, who had insisted on helping her prepare. She wore the silver locket Nathan had given her at Christmas, and inside she had placed a tiny photograph of Thomas on one side and a lock of Nathan's hair on the other, a perfect symbol of her past and future intertwined. The ceremony was held in the church, packed with what seemed like the entire population of Hawthorne and many of the ranch hands from the Anderson spread. Caroline Henderson served as Olivia's attendant, while Nathan's best man was Robert Anderson, the eldest son of the ranch owners. The minister who had buried Thomas now joined Olivia and Nathan in marriage, and there was something fitting about that, a sense of things coming full circle. Nathan looked devastatingly handsome in his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed, and his blue eyes shining with love as Olivia walked down the aisle toward him. She had no father to give her away. He had died when she was young, so she walked alone, proud and steady, making this choice for herself. The vows were traditional, promises to love and honor and cherish for as long as they both should live. When Nathan slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, Olivia felt a surge of joy so intense it almost overwhelmed her. This was right. This was good. This was the beginning of a new chapter that honored the past while embracing the future. "You may kiss your bride," the minister said, and Nathan did, thoroughly and joyfully, to the cheers of the assembled crowd. The reception at the ranch was everything Olivia could have hoped for. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, toasts and well wishes from people who genuinely cared about the newlyweds. Olivia danced with Nathan, of course, but also with Mr. Anderson and several of the ranch hands and even the minister. She felt light and free, no longer weighed down by the black dress and the grief it represented. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Nathan pulled Olivia aside. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Young?" Mrs. Young, her new name, her new identity. "Yes," Olivia said, smiling up at her husband. "I am ready." They walked together to Nathan's cabin, their cabin now, and Nathan carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests. Inside, everything was warm and welcoming, the fire crackling in the hearth and candles lit on every surface. Someone, probably Mrs. Anderson, had been by to prepare the space for their wedding night. Nathan kissed her again, slower this time, full of promise and desire. "I love you, Olivia Young. I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you make me." "You already do," Olivia whispered against his lips. "You already do." Their first night as husband and wife was everything Olivia had hoped for and more. Nathan was gentle and patient, mindful that she had not been with anyone since Thomas died. He took his time, worshiping her body with touches and kisses, making sure she felt cherished and desired. And when they finally came together, it felt right, like two puzzle pieces fitting together perfectly. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, Olivia's head on Nathan's chest as his fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I was afraid," she admitted in the darkness. "Afraid that being with you would feel like a betrayal of Thomas." "And does it?" Nathan asked, his voice neutral, giving her space to be honest. "No, it feels like honoring the love I learned from him, while creating something new with you. It feels like the next chapter of my life beginning." She tilted her head to look at him. "Thank you for being patient with me, for giving me the time I needed to be ready for this." "You were worth the wait," Nathan said simply. "You will always be worth the wait." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the beginning of countless nights they would spend this way over the coming years. The first months of marriage were an adjustment for both of them. Olivia had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and long days, the constant demands of animals and weather and equipment that always seemed to break at the worst possible moment. But she adapted quickly, finding her place in the community of ranch workers and proving herself capable of everything from mending torn shirts to helping with difficult births in the barn. Nathan, in turn, had to adjust to sharing his space with another person after years of solitude. But he took to married life with enthusiasm, clearly delighted to come home each evening to a warm house and a hot meal, and a wife who greeted him with genuine affection. They bickered occasionally, as all couples do, but their arguments never lasted long and always ended with apologies and renewed understanding. Summer brought intense heat and long days spent working the cattle. Olivia helped where she could, learning to ride well enough to accompany Nathan on some of the shorter trips around the ranch property. She loved these excursions, the sense of freedom that came with being on horseback in the vast Nevada landscape. Nothing but sky and sagebrush, stretching to the horizon in every direction. In August, Olivia began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited another month to be sure, watching for the telltale signs, before finally confirming it with the doctor during a trip into Hawthorne. The news filled her with a complex mixture of emotions: joy at the prospect of becoming a mother, anxiety about childbirth and all its dangers, and a bittersweet sadness that Thomas would never know this child. She told Nathan that evening after dinner as they sat together on the porch watching the sun set. "I went to see the doctor today," she said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." Nathan's face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, joy, wonder, fear, before settling on pure happiness. "Truly? You are certain?" "As certain as I can be at this stage. The doctor thinks the baby will come in March, early spring." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You have made me the happiest man alive," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A baby, our baby. Olivia, I cannot believe it." They stayed on the porch until full dark, talking about names and making plans for the future. Nathan immediately began working on expanding the cabin, adding a second room that could serve as a nursery. Olivia started sewing baby clothes and blankets, her fingers flying over the tiny garments with practiced skill. The pregnancy progressed normally through the fall and into winter. Olivia felt tired and occasionally sick, but nothing out of the ordinary for a woman expecting her first child. Nathan was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying that she was doing too much or lifting something too heavy. It drove Olivia crazy even as she appreciated his concern. Winter was cold that year, with more snow than usual falling in the mountains, and even dusting the valley floor around the ranch. Olivia spent most of her time indoors, sewing and reading and preparing for the baby's arrival. Mrs. Anderson visited regularly, sharing wisdom from her own experiences as a mother and offering practical advice about everything from nursing to sleep schedules. Christmas came again, their first as a married couple. They celebrated quietly at the cabin, exchanging small gifts and talking about how different next Christmas would be with a baby in the house. Nathan gave Olivia a beautiful cradle he had built himself, the wood sanded smooth as silk and painted with delicate flowers. Olivia cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness and skill. January and February passed slowly, each day bringing Olivia closer to her due date. She was huge now, her belly so large she could barely see her feet, and she waddled rather than walked. Nathan found her beautiful anyway, constantly telling her how radiant she looked, how proud he was of her strength and courage. March arrived with its usual unpredictable weather, warm one day and frigid the next. Olivia's due date came and went with no sign of the baby, and she grew increasingly uncomfortable and impatient. Finally, on a warm afternoon near the end of the month, her water broke while she was hanging laundry behind the cabin. The labor was long and difficult, lasting well into the next day. Nathan stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead and murmuring encouragement, even as his own face grew pale with worry. Mrs. Anderson and the doctor were there as well, offering guidance and assistance, but ultimately it was Olivia who had to do the work, pushing through pain unlike anything she had ever experienced. Just before dawn, on March 23, 1884, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The moment she heard his first cry, all the pain and fear disappeared, replaced by a love so fierce and immediate it took her breath away. The doctor placed the baby on her chest, and Olivia stared down at his tiny red face in absolute wonder. "He is perfect," Nathan breathed, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son. "Olivia, he is perfect." They named him Thomas Nathan Young, honoring both the man who had first taught Olivia about love and the man who had shown her she could love again. It felt right, this naming, a way of connecting past and future, of acknowledging that both men had played crucial roles in bringing this new life into the world. The early weeks of parenthood were exhausting, but magical. Olivia had never known it was possible to be so tired and so happy at the same time. Thomas, they called him Tommy, to distinguish him from his namesake, was a good baby, sleeping in reasonable stretches and nursing enthusiastically. Nathan was a devoted father, constantly holding his son and talking to him in a soft voice, telling him stories about the ranch and the horses and all the things they would do together when Tommy was older. Spring turned to summer, and Tommy grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, smiling baby who clearly recognized his parents and delighted in their attention. Olivia had never felt more fulfilled, more complete, than she did during those months of watching her son develop his personality and learn about the world around him. On a warm evening in June, as they sat on the porch with Tommy asleep in Nathan's arms, Olivia reflected on how far she had come. 2 years ago, she had been drowning in grief, convinced her life was over, unable to imagine a future that held anything but pain. And now, here she was, married to a wonderful man, mother to a beautiful son, living a life she loved on a ranch in the middle of Nevada. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, noticing her expression. "About how lucky I am," Olivia said. "About how close I came to missing all of this, because I was too afraid to let go of my grief and take a chance on loving again." "I am the lucky one," Nathan countered. "You could have chosen to stay locked in that dark place, and I would not have blamed you. But you had the courage to dance with me that night at the festival, to give us a chance, and that changed both our lives. You told me I had mourned enough," Olivia remembered. "You said, 'Come dance with me,' and I did, even though I was terrified. Best decision I ever made." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Tommy stirred in Nathan's arms but did not wake, and Olivia felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful in its intensity. Over the next few years, life on the ranch continued its steady rhythm. Tommy grew into a rambunctious toddler, then a curious little boy who followed his father everywhere and asked endless questions about everything he saw. In 1886, Olivia gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah after Nathan's first wife, with Olivia's blessing and encouragement. It felt right to honor the woman who had shaped Nathan into the man he became, just as they had honored Thomas. Sarah was different from her brother, quieter, more observant, with her mother's green eyes and her father's serious expression. She and Tommy were devoted to each other, playing together for hours and rarely fighting, despite the typical sibling squabbles. The Andersons eventually retired and sold the ranch to Nathan and Olivia, recognizing that Nathan had been running it in all but name for years anyway. It was a huge responsibility, but they took it on with confidence born of experience. Under their management, the ranch thrived, expanding its operations and becoming one of the most successful in the region. In 1889, they had a third child, another boy they named Benjamin, and their family felt complete. The cabin had long since been expanded into a proper house, with multiple bedrooms and a large kitchen where Olivia reigned supreme. She still took in occasional sewing work, but mostly she was occupied with running the household and raising the children. Hawthorne changed around them as the years passed. The silver mines began to play out, and some families moved away seeking opportunities elsewhere. But a core community remained, people who had put down roots and intended to stay, and Olivia and Nathan were at the heart of that community. They hosted gatherings at the ranch, helped neighbors in times of trouble, contributed to the church and school, and raised their children to be good, kind, contributing members of society. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1893, Nathan took Olivia back to the canyon where he had first asked to court her. The place looked much the same, though they were older now, with lines on their faces and gray in their hair. They sat on the same flat rock, holding hands, as they had done so many times over the years. "Do you have any regrets?" Nathan asked, knowing she would understand what he really meant. Did she regret moving on from Thomas? Did she regret choosing a new life when she could have stayed forever in mourning? "None," Olivia said firmly. "I love Thomas, and I will always carry him with me. But I also love you, and I love the life we have built together. If I had stayed locked in that grief, I would have missed out on so much our children, this ranch, the community we have helped create. You gave me permission to live again, Nathan, and that was the greatest gift anyone could have given me." "You gave yourself permission," Nathan corrected, as he always did. "I just happened to be there when you were ready." They made love in the canyon that afternoon, under the wide Nevada sky, with the sun warm on their skin and the sound of the stream providing a gentle soundtrack. At 44 and 41, they were no longer the young people who had found each other after loss, but their love had only deepened with time, seasoned by years of partnership and shared experiences. The years continued to roll by, marked by the milestones of their children's lives. Tommy grew into a young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did, learning every aspect of the business and showing a natural aptitude for managing both animals and people. Sarah surprised everyone by developing a talent for drawing, creating beautiful sketches of ranch life that she eventually sold to newspapers and magazines in San Francisco. Benjamin was the scholar of the family, always with his nose in a book, and eventually he left the ranch to attend university in California, though he came home often. Olivia and Nathan aged together gracefully, their hair going silver, their faces weathering like the desert landscape around them. They remained devoted to each other, still holding hands as they walked around the ranch, still stealing kisses when they thought no one was looking, still finding joy in the simple act of being together. In the early 1900s, as a new century dawned, they became grandparents when Tommy married a local girl named Emma and started a family of his own. Olivia threw herself into the role with enthusiasm, spoiling her grandchildren shamelessly and passing on her skills in sewing and cooking to a new generation. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their now substantial ranch house, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Olivia leaned against Nathan's shoulder and smiled. "We did well," she said softly. "You and I, we built something good." "We did," Nathan agreed, pressing a kiss to her silver hair. "From grief and loss, we created a life full of love and purpose. I would not change a single moment of it." Olivia looked out at the land they had worked so hard to maintain, at the family they had created together, at the legacy they would leave behind. She thought of Thomas, as she still did regularly, but the pain had long since faded to a gentle melancholy, a bittersweet appreciation for what they had shared, and a recognition that his death, while tragic, had ultimately led her to this moment, this life, this profound happiness. "Thank you," she said to Nathan, as she had said so many times over the years. "Thank you for asking me to dance that night. Thank you for showing me that it was possible to love again." "Thank you for saying yes," Nathan replied. "Thank you for being brave enough to take my hand and step back into the light." They sat together until the stars came out, holding hands as they had done for decades, two people who had found each other in the aftermath of tragedy and built something beautiful from the ruins of their separate griefs. The black dress was long gone, replaced by a lifetime of colorful memories and deep, abiding love. And if sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, Olivia whispered a thank you to Thomas for releasing her, for giving her permission to be happy again, well, that was between her and the man whose memory she had honored by choosing to live fully rather than merely survive, Nathan understood. And he never once felt diminished by the love she still carried for her first husband, because he knew that her capacity to love so deeply was part of what made her who she was, the remarkable woman who had captured his heart and held it safe for all these years. Their story became part of the local legend in Hawthorne, told and retold to new generations, as an example of how love could triumph over grief, how courage could lead to healing, how a simple invitation to dance could change the course of two lives forever. And always, when the story was told, people remembered that moment at the Harvest Festival in 1882, when a cowboy looked at a woman who had worn black for a year straight and said the words that would alter both their destinies. You have mourned enough. Come dance with me. Years later, when Olivia was in her 70s and Nathan in his late 60s, they made one final trip to the canyon that had always been their special place. Nathan's health was failing, the hard years of ranch work had taken their toll on his body, and they both knew their time together was growing shorter. But they did not speak of sadness or endings. Instead, they reminisced about all the good times, the challenges they had overcome together, the children and grandchildren who would carry on after they were gone. "If I go first," Nathan said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I do not want you to wear black for a year straight. I want you to celebrate the life we had together, not mourn its ending." Olivia smiled, touched by his concern even now. "And if I go first, what will you do?" "I will miss you every single day for the rest of my life," Nathan said honestly. "But I will remember what we taught each other, that love does not end when someone dies. It just changes form. And I will keep living, keep finding joy where I can, because that is what you would want for me." "Yes," Olivia agreed. "That is exactly what I would want." As it happened, they had many more years together. Nathan's health stabilized, and they enjoyed a long, peaceful old age surrounded by family and friends. When Olivia finally passed away at the age of 82, peacefully in her sleep, with Nathan holding her hand, he mourned her deeply, but not destructively. He wore his grief with dignity, allowing himself to feel the pain while also celebrating the extraordinary life they had shared. Nathan lived 3 more years after Olivia's death, long enough to see his great-grandchildren born and to know that the ranch would continue in capable hands. When he died at 81, his last words were of Olivia, and those who were with him swore he was smiling as he took his final breath, as if he could see her waiting for him on the other side. They were buried side by side in the Hawthorne Cemetery, not far from Thomas's grave, and the inscription on their shared headstone read simply, "Nathan and Olivia Young, they danced together through life, and love was their music." It was a fitting epitaph for 2 people who had found each other in the depths of grief and chosen to create something beautiful together, proving that even the darkest morning could give way to light if one had the courage to accept an outstretched hand and step back onto the dance floor of life. The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants, and the story of how Nathan and Olivia found each other became part of the family's cherished history, told to each new generation as a reminder that love could bloom even in the harshest circumstances, that healing was always possible, and that sometimes the most courageous thing a person could do was to set down their grief, take a deep breath, and say yes when someone offered them a chance at happiness. The black dress that Olivia had worn for a year straight was preserved, eventually donated to a museum as a historical artifact. But what people remembered was not the mourning, but the moment she chose to set it aside. The night a cowboy with kind blue eyes told her she had mourned enough and asked her to dance. The decision that changed everything and proved that second chances were real, that love could strike twice, and that the human heart had an infinite capacity for healing, if given the opportunity and the encouragement to try.